As if the McCrispy couldn't get any better, Bacon and Ranch just entered the chat. The Bacon Ranch McCrispy, available at participating McDonald's for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
So, you open Google Chrome on your phone, you're rushing to buy tickets to a concert that all your friends are going to. Picture yourself now, crowd surfing to the front, being invited onto the stage, backstage the world tour, and before you know it, you're dancing in Tokyo. Wait, what? 3 tickets left? It's a good thing your saved payment details autofill quickly and securely. There's no place like Chrome. Download Google Chrome on your phone.
Somehow it's already Wednesday. Somehow the NFL draft is almost exactly 2 weeks from tomorrow, and life just keeps pushing on. But hey, we'll take it. The NFL draft is one of my favorite times of the year. Hopefully it's your favorite time of the year, and that's why we're going to bring you all the Bengals draft previews and discussions right here on this podcast. Welcome into another edition of the Strictly Stripes podcast. Muhammad Ahmad, Andrew Gillis, and Mike Nizick here with you. And before we jump in, folks, I forgot to remind you guys yesterday, but make sure you sign up for our newsletter, the Strictly Stripes newsletter. It's very easy. It's free. It lands in your inbox every morning. All you got to do is go to cleveland.com/newsletters. And when you want to sign up, click on the Strictly Stripes newsletter. And again, it takes just a second, and you'll get all of the insights and reporting from me, Mike, and Andrew every day during the week. And, of course, if you haven't signed up for Cincinnati Football Insider, that's our subtext service where we bring you all of the breaking news and insights and opinions on the team before it hits social media, before it even hits the web. You are part of the Cool Kids Club. And, again, easy to sign up. Go to cleveland.com/Bengals. Click on the blue banner at the top of the page. It's a 2-week free trial to start, and if you want to stick with it, it's $4.99 a month. But again, if you don't want to stick with it after 2 weeks or during the 2 weeks, you can cancel anytime, but you're not going to want to cancel because, like I said, it's a lot of fun. This is the fun club. This is why we do this podcast. But yeah, make sure you go to cleveland.com/Bengals and sign up. So we've talked about just about every major area of need for the Bengals, both sides of the trenches, cornerback, running back, tight end. We even talked about safety on Monday, but there's the question of you got to think, what is the one area that we haven't talked about that maybe, just maybe, we might not be giving enough attention to as far as what the Bengals might need in this year's draft? Do you guys think out of all that we've talked about, there's just something we haven't mentioned that just might be hiding as far as what the Bengals need to focus on in the draft? I think there is, but before I say what it is, I want to see where you guys think it is if we're on the same page.
Yeah, so, I think when you look at mock drafts that we do, whether that's, just on our own time or kind of the mock drafts that we've officially done or, mock drafts that fans do, they kind of conveniently in air quotes, they conveniently fill the Bengals' biggest needs. They're all of a sudden, you're drafting a tight end, you're drafting a running back, you're drafting a tackle in the first 3 rounds, or, and you're drafting those 3 rounds in 2, 3, and 4, and a defensive lineman's first. You kind of see that. But, I think if you were to really kind of hone it down, I think, 3 positions that you really haven't, discussed, because I don't think corner would be a surprise. I think the 3 would obviously be receiver, linebacker, and safety. If they were going to go, quote unquote, off the board. I think there are some options there, and again, you can talk about kind of how these things are going to go in 2023, because Mike and I have had this debate before. Hey, well, you got to try to win now, blah blah blah, but we mentioned with our linebacker discussion, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Bocce, Bailey, they're all coming up on contracts. At receiver, you're in a weird situation because Jamar Chase is locked into 2024. Tyler Boyd, free agent. T. Higgins, free agent. Trent Taylor, free agent. You're talking about guys that are, you're going to need to kind of rebuild your receiving room, or you might need to in a year. So, I think if they were to kind of stick with that, we're going to draft a player and kind of bring them along. I mean, receiver, safety, linebacker, I don't think that those are necessarily the craziest options in the world.
Well, are you talking just a day 3 pick, or are you talking on a day 1 or 2 pick?
Well, I think it depends. I think it's pretty clear that Jackson Smith and Jig was going to be gone. But if you're sitting there and Zay Flowers is there at 28, where it kind of doesn't look like he's going to be available, I mean, that to me is a really, really nice slot player to throw in. And, you run some 4 wide in 2023 when everybody's healthy and you're feeling good about that. And then all of a sudden in 2024, you have Jamar Chase, you have Zay Flowers on a rookie contract. He's your slot. Then if you re-sign T. Higgins, then there's your 1, 2, 3. Or if T. Higgins is gone, then the need is less. So I think it depends. If you're talking, an elite player, we mentioned the Branch kid from Alabama. If you really like him and he's available at first or second round, like, I don't know. I think it just depends, because I made this kind of case before. You can feel great about your receivers and say, hey, we don't need, Zay Flowers is the 12th ranked player on our board, but we're going to pass him over for the 21st player because we need a tight end more. But first day of camp, Tyler Boyd hurts his knee. Then all of a sudden you're in a bit of a pickle. And I just think if you stick to the best player available kind of model, you can avoid some of those scenarios.
Right, but what if you don't draft a tight end and then Irv Smith tears his ACL? Like, I think that you'd be crazy not to draft a tight end and running back in the first 3 rounds, just based on your roster right now, the way you've left it in free agency. Whether that leaves room for someone else that's not at those other positions of need, I think is debatable. But like I said, I think you have to really, focus on those 2 positions in particular, with those top 3 picks, just because you didn't address them in free agency, really. I mean, I know you signed 1 tight end, but I mean, you've got 2 clear holes on the roster, and so I think that, investing more at a position you're already strong at is dangerous when you have some real gaps in the roster right now. This is not like a, perfect situation where they just, need to find depth. Like, they need guys that can compete for playing time at multiple spots right now. And I think that, wide receiver would be sort of a luxury pick, which I don't know that they necessarily have that luxury right now.
So let me ask you this, Mike, and before I ask, let me say I'm kind of with Andrew. That's kind of where I was going to go. I think there really is. I don't think there's an urgent need for wide receiver. I don't want to make it sound like they emphatically need one, but I think there's a case to be made. But before I make the case, let me ask you this, Mike. Okay, let's assume, again, this is in this scenario, you pick a tight end and running back in either of the first 2 rounds in whatever order. Okay, what if you get to like round 3 or maybe even round 4? Because, again, I don't think it's that urgent. And maybe you've got like, and we'll go through some of the names later, like maybe somehow Kayshon Boutte from LSU's on the board, or Tyler Scott from UC, a local guy, and Jaden Reed from Michigan State. Like, if either of those guys are on the board, and you feel pretty good about tight end, no matter what happens with Irv Smith. Like, say he tears the ACL, okay, we got a tight end in the first round. Joe Mixon is either not doing well or he gets cut, got a running back in the first round or second round. I mean, would you not look at that as a crazy pick if you go for one of those really good wideouts in that 3rd, 4th round?
I mean, you're really good, I think, as a stretch. I mean, this draft isn't particularly strong at wide receiver. I think, that you're going to take a flyer on a guy that's not, maybe that doesn't have the size. I mean, I think you could do that at any point and, get an undrafted free agent that'll kind of match that sort of that body or that production. I just don't know that in the 3rd and 4th round that's sort of necessary to do. At that point, I think you have other spots where you need. I'd rather have depth at defensive line than more depth at wide receiver.
But to Andrew's point, and I want to get you in on this, Andrew. Like, let's say you go the route that you're mentioning. You don't really prioritize that, or not like prioritize it, but you don't even like do anything with it, I should say, at wide receiver. And then Tyler Boyd, his knee is gone in training camp. Or
well, you
maybe
can literally say that about every position. It's not, you can't draft like that because, like, well, what if Joe Burrow's hurt? Well, what if Trey Hendrickson
Joe Burrow's a different case.
No, but I'm saying, like, you could literally go down the roster and just say the top player gets injured. What do? You have to draft somebody. So, I mean, I don't really think that that's how you draft.
No, I will say, like, you're right in the way that, if you make a luxury pick in the first or the second round, like if you pick, I don't know, if you pick Michael Mayer at 28, and then in the second round you take, I'm trying to
Jahmyr Gibbs, if he's even there, Devin A-Chain.
No, because you could need a running back. I'm trying to think, like, if you take a linebacker in round 2, or you take a receiver in round 2, like, I think that then you do kind of have to change the way you draft the rest of the way, because you need another tight end, you need a running back, you need to leave the draft. But, like, I think early in the draft, you can, if you're sitting there and there's a kid that you really like who you think can be a really big impact player, I mean, you can draft him. Like, if you think Quentin Johnston is going to be like a genuine NFL #1 receiver, take him. If you think he's going to be that game-changing player, as you get later in the draft, it kind of fades off. Now, so I think that it's one of those things where if you do opt for a luxury pick, you can do that. It just means that you have to kind of change the philosophical thinking of that particular draft as you kind of go through it, because like I said, if you take a running back first and then a linebacker second, well, you need some pass rush, you need a tight end. Like, you kind of need to look that way later. But if you think you can get an impact player early, I mean, why not?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because, like, obviously you mentioned Quentin Johnson. I mean, he's undisputedly the top receiver in the draft. I mean, in my opinion, size-wise, his speed, the way he runs vertical routes. I mean, he's 6'4", 215. He's got that T. Higgins build. He's averaging almost 19 yards per catch, I think, in college overall, not just his senior year. And it's not a knock on Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he's up there too, but I like the size on Johnston, because kind of like Mike said, he snuck in a good point there. There's not really, like, I looked at this class of wide receivers, there's not a lot of size. Like, Johnston's 6'4", Njigba's only 6 foot, and then I'm looking at other heights, like Zay Flowers, 5'9", Jordan Addison, 5'11", Nathaniel Dell from Houston, 5'8". Like, he's shorter than me. I'm 5'9". Like, I mean, yeah, you got Jalen Hyatt, who's 6 foot from Tennessee, but those are the exceptions. I mean, there's not really, as far as like the guys who really matter, if you go way down the list, there's some taller guys, but if we're talking like top 100, yeah, there's not a lot of size in there. And that's where I think you could make the case that, the Bengals like taller guys. Like, all of their wide receivers, with the exception of Trent Taylor, are 6 and up. Like, T. Higgins is 6'4", Jamar Chase is 6 foot, Tyler Boyd's about 6'2", 6'3"-ish. Trenton Irwin's 6'2". Like, that's just kind of that prototype they like, of like long, slender receivers. There's a reason why Trent Taylor, with respect to him, he's 5'8", it's why he's more of a punt returner and a backup. So, I mean, if you think, you can go for one of those like shorter guys I mentioned. I shouldn't say short, but like shorter in rank. I think it'd be interesting because it kind of goes against the norms of how the Bengals have traditionally picked receivers. Because, I mean, look at A.J. Green. Like I said, he's kind of that, that 6'4" build. I mean, even John Ross, as much as we can talk about him being one of the biggest busts in team history, he was like 6'6'1". Again, that's a whole other conversation. We'll actually probably have a podcast on that in the coming days. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Andrew, if you're like the Bengals, let's say, okay, you kind of go to that 3rd, 4th round tier, that early mid-round tier I was mentioning. Like, I mentioned some of those names there, maybe there's some I didn't mention, but either from those names or other names I didn't mention, like, are there some guys that you think the Bengals could or should entertain at that specific point in the draft if, they're thinking about playing with wide receiver?
At wide receiver, yeah. One of the guys who I've seen a lot and I've heard a lot, and obviously we're not experts, but kind of watching what I can from Trey Palmer out of Nebraska. I really like him. He's got some, he's just got innate ball skills that are kind of hard to describe. There's just like a feel that you can kind of tell when you watch him play, where he's really savvy with how he plays a position. I know, if the Bengals end up drafting Trey Palmer, we should probably have Jimmy Watkins on. Jimmy covered him at Nebraska, and I think he wrote a story about him one time where, they got him as a transfer from LSU, and, there were people there who were like, we thought this kid was just as talented as Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And
wow.
there were parts of Trey's game that people really liked about him. And I remember he told me that months ago. So that kind of has always stuck with me. So, I think that that could be an option for them in the mid rounds if you want to do that. And then there are guys where you can look at, and, as you get to the later rounds, a Raheem Jarrett from Maryland kind of stands out to me just because, with Talia at Maryland, I mean, what was that quarterback situation like? He ran a 4.44 40. I don't know if that was too many fours, but he ran decently well at the combine. I think of another guy, Darius Davis. He was kind of shadowed by Quentin Johnston at TCU, and he's not that big of a guy, so he'd be playing in the slot. But there are guys late, and I think that I would actually not really be surprised at all if kind of from round 3 on, if wide receiver is on the board for them.
I like that you mentioned Palmer, and actually I didn't realize Jimmy covered him. I actually wonder, did Jimmy cover Cam Taylor-Britt? Because you said Nebraska, right? Oh,
yes. Yeah. So Jimmy came down, covered the Browns game here, and he and Cam talked for a few minutes. And yeah, Cam, I walked up to Cam later. I was like, hope he didn't tell him anything good. And Cam was like, oh no, he's like, he and I are boys from Nebraska. So.
Oh, that's funny. No, that's actually cool. I just made that connection. I don't think there's any other Nebraska dogs on that team, but that's pretty cool. With Palmer, it's interesting. I was just kind of looking at his numbers as you mentioned it. He's a former 5-star recruit. He was at LSU, actually. I don't know when he was there. I think it was after Joe Burrow was there, but it was at LSU one point. Goes to Nebraska. Freaky fast speed. I mean, ran a 4.3 340-yard dash. But the reason why he's on the middle to lower tier in terms of athleticism and production is it's just his route running, I think, is not questionable, but it really isn't the best. It looks like kind of the analysis that, a lot of experts have is that gives coverages too many breaks. So maybe that's something he improves. But, I mean, the Bengals like fast guys. They also like big guys. I think he's about 5'11", 6 foot. So maybe that's a guy that you can work on as a project. And then if Tyler Boyd's not back in 2024, maybe that's your guy. Maybe he kind of fits that bill. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Bengals' sneaky draft needs, and we're going to sort of look at the past and how that sort of molds the present for the Bengals with the draft in 2 weeks. Plus, we're going to get into a little Super Mario talk, if you know what I mean. Stay tuned for all that right here on the Strictly Stripes podcast.
Lightning Lee Murray wanted to be world champion in the UFC.
He just happens to be involved in the largest cash robbery in the world.
It's definitely not sane.
Showtime Sports presents the unbelievable true story about the MMA fighter who pulled off one of the largest heists in history.
Huge amounts of money, armed gang, disguises, kidnapping.
This is the sort of thing you see in Hollywood films.
We've never seen that for real.
Catching Lightning, streaming now, only on Showtime, streaming with Paramount Plus.
All right, thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. So as me, Andrew, and Mike have been talking about some sneaky needs that the Bengals might have in the draft, wide receiver is a talking point that came up a lot. Andrew mentioned Trey Palmer from Nebraska, a guy that the Bengals could look at in mid-round. I think, 2 names that come to mind, if the Bengals want to target someone in that 3rd to 5th round tier, I like Tyler Scott from Cincinnati. I know I'm a hypocrite because he's 5'10", and I said the Bengals traditionally like to and should go for taller guys, but I think he's just got skill, being a former running back who in some ways I guess you could say still learning the position, but I think that's coveted. I think maybe that's something that actually the Bengals could get a lot out of. Being from the area definitely helps. Ran a 4.40. That was a lot of fours, but I really like Jaden Reed. I really like him. He's got nice soft hands. He didn't have much help with Michigan State's passing attack last year, but to do what he did, doing all he could, and having those numbers he had, I think there's no shame in that. Really nuanced route runner, and I think he's just been doing it really all throughout college if you look at just his tape from start to finish. So those are, my names I think that come to mind. And if I were doing a mock draft, like now that I think about it, and I'm in that 3rd, 4th round, I might say, okay, if, either of them are on the board, let's divvy it up. Let's have some fun. If you want to go later in the draft, I think Bryce Ford Wheaton from West Virginia is good, 6'4" wide receiver. Not as raw as the other names, but if you like size, that's a good guy. But, there's actually one question I wanted to ask in terms of like sneaky needs. We know the Bengals are going to bring in a punter because they said there's going to be competition with Drew Chrisman in training camp. Whether it be 7th round or an undrafted free agent, there's going to be somebody. But like, if you're in the 7th round and you've pretty much got all your boxes checked, like offensive tackle, running back, tight end, maybe even wide receiver at some point, is it too much to ask for a punter? Like if you have Bryce Behringer or Michael Turk available, or do you say don't even take a chance, just focus on like a non-special teams pick and then handle that in free agency after the draft?
Well, Darren Simmons said at the combine that there were probably no draft-worthy punters, so probably just wait for sign somebody as a priority undrafted free agent, and then try to take a swing at a guy that's fallen on your board that put a different spot where you're not wasting a pick. So just going by their words seems like not the smartest move to just draft a punter to get one when you can just sign one.
I mean, Andrew, that is true. Darren Simmons didn't say that, but do you think maybe the Bengals have a change of heart right before, draft day?
No, I think, I don't think you draft a punter. I think, if you were going to use a selection like that, where you're going to take a punter, like if you take a punter, I mean, you have got to give that kid every single possible chance to win that job, because you don't want to waste a roster spot on a guy who might not make the team. Like if you're going to do that, I think it would be much smarter for them to draft a quarterback, and kind of have a younger player under Burrow to kind of develop. So, if you're going to go that route, I wouldn't, I would probably lean quarterback over punter.
Yeah, actually, man, now I'm kind of with you, because I'm thinking if it's the 7th round, and Carrington Valentine is on that board, who I think he has visited with the Bengals from what I've seen in reports, and he went to Muller High School, same high school as Sam Hubbard, played at my alma mater, Kentucky, although I didn't cover him. So I know I'm biased when I say this, but even objectively, like if that's a guy that's on the board in the 7th round, yeah, I'd probably take him over Bryce Behringer. But I don't know, Behringer was interesting to me because he was punter of the year in the Big Ten last year, and obviously Drew Chrisman is a former Ohio State Buckeye, so a little Big Ten punting competition would have been nice. But who knows, maybe he goes undrafted. Maybe the Bengals get lucky and say, okay, we didn't have to waste a pick on you. Let's sign you and actually make that Big Ten competition come to life. But I think with Chrisman too, I mean, again, there's going to be competition, but like I would think if, like Andrew said, if you're going to bring in a guy with that 7th round pick, you're going to give him all the reps, hoping that he almost beats Chrisman out. Because, like, here's the thing. Punter is not, like, the most urgent need, like wide receiver, but they have to do something there because, I mean, let's be real. I don't want to put the entire AFC Championship loss on Drew Chrisman. That's beyond unfair. But, I mean, what if that punt goes 10, 20 yards farther back? And I know it's part of the coverage, too. I'm not just going to put it on his leg. But, I mean, if it goes for a little bit farther back, maybe Sky Moore doesn't make that return, no matter what Joseph Osai does at the end of the game. Maybe we have a different conversation. But, I mean, I get it. It's one play. Maybe I'm overblowing it. But, I mean, Darren Simmons wasn't happy about it when he talked about it. You could tell he was very upset because, I mean, he's an old school guy. He's been doing this for like 20 plus years with the Bengals. So I don't know. I think if you're not going to get in the 7th round, just make sure you get the best free agent you can get, which they're going to do. But that's where I think the emphasis should be. To kind of tie all this together, I mean, I think later next week and the week after leading into draft day, I want to actually go back and look back at some of the specific drafts the Bengals have had, like the 2020 draft and 2021 draft, which, those are two of the most influential drafts they've had in recent memory. But when you just kind of look at the trends the Bengals have had in the draft, I guess you could say the last 3 years, looking at that and then just assessing all that we've talked about with, the positions that they need up to this point. Like how well do you think the Bengals have like nailed the draft process in the last 3 years? Like, do you think they're drafting better than a lot of teams in the last 3 years, or do you think there's just kind of luck? I mean, like how much do you sort of trust the process, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, I think, some of the better, I mean, there are teams that are better at it than others. I think you can kind of know who those teams are just over the last handful of years. I mean, the Ravens have been really good. The Seahawks have been really good. The Packers have been really good. You can kind of figure it out, and you can going to the teams who haven't been good. The Browns, the Jets. Like, there have been some teams that have been really bad. But I think pretty much anybody will tell you that the draft, I mean, you can be better at it than others, but it is for a lot of people a crapshoot. I mean, like, the 2019 class for the Bengals, like, the first 3 picks in that with Jonah Williams, Drew Sample, Jermaine Pratt. One of them doesn't sound like he's going to come back. One of them has requested a trade, and one of them got re-signed. The 2020 class looks really good because it has Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Logan Wilson as your first 3, and that looks really good. And then, in 20, I think it's too early to grade 22, but in 21, Jamar Chase, Jackson Carman, Joseph Osai, like, Jamar was obviously a major success, but that wasn't a layup pick because you had other options there, but it was a smart pick, but you knew he was going to be good. And I don't know. I just think that, you can make good picks at, at nice spots, and you're really going to find out how good they are at drafting over these next handful of years when you're not picking Joe Burrow first and Jamar Chase 5th. Like, you're going to have some challenges here. So, it's gonna be cyclical. I think you're gonna have a year where, hey, they're gonna draft 4 starters with 8 picks, and it's gonna be a really successful draft. And there's gonna be a year where it's like, all right, maybe one guy from this class in 3 or 4 years is thinking about a second contract. So it's I think it all just kind of depends. It all just fluctuates.
Yeah, and I think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase sort of paper over some of the weaknesses too. Like, that 21 draft class is, other than Chase and McPherson, which was a good pick in the 5th round, is pretty not, bad, I guess. There's still room for those players to sort of make their mark, I suppose, but it's not trending in the right direction. You mentioned the 2019 draft, and after Jermaine Pratt, I think only one, I'm looking at it right now, I think Travion Williams is the only guy still on the roster.
Yep.
Same thing, 2018, Bates and Hubbard, and then everybody else is basically a bust. So it's been actually pretty hit or miss, and I think when you draft, the franchise quarterback and you get that right, everybody celebrates you, which is, I think can't be understated that teams have missed that and how much it sets back the franchise. So I think that is a victory. But in terms of finding sort of consistency across the rest of the draft, Duke Tobin's record is not necessarily like spotless. And he's been doing this for a long time too. And this franchise hasn't been known for winning a Super Bowl. Obviously, didn't have a lot of playoff wins until Joe Burrow got here. So, like, I don't, how do you measure success with the draft? It's probably playoff wins. So I don't know. It's like he's not, I think, perfect in that regard. So I don't know that, faith or like saying, oh, he's going to get this right because you've had such a, it's pretty spotty, I think. And I don't think that's being unfair.
Yeah, I think
it's not. No, I agree. It's not
right too, because you can go like the 2020 draft. Like, T. Higgins could have been a bust. T. Higgins could have flopped. He could have not been good. Logan Wilson could have not been good. But if you kind of like, there are certain numbers. There's like approximate value and things that people use to kind of look at. Hey, here's how successful a draft class was, or here's how many games played you got out of a draft class. Like, if you hit on one of those guys, like specifically Joe Burrow, who you would assume here is going to be in Cincinnati and for a pretty long time. Some of that can kind of mask over it. So, I think you can hit home runs, but you've also got to start hitting some singles, and that is kind of how you build a long-term sustainable product rather than just keep swinging for the fence.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Andrew. I think that really, like how you said, hitting singles encapsulates everything. That kind of sums up how they've done the last couple of years and what that means as we look ahead to, like I said, almost exactly 2 weeks from now, that they're going to be doing the same thing again. And we'll talk more specifically about like the 2020 class and the 2021 class later, to kind of preview the draft. But I just want to kind of get your thoughts on that. And you guys had some great takes there. I mean, like Mike said, I think maybe sometimes Joe Burrow's success, which is, again, a big one, it can overshadow some blind spots. And if you go way back, like I'm not just talking the last 10 years, the last 20 years, which is, I think Dude Tobin's been there since 1999. I mean, almost as long as I've been alive. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things you could point out like since then. Because, I mean, don't forget, there's a reason why they drafted Carson Palmer. They were 2-14 the year before that, just like they were when they drafted Joe Burrow in 2020. So we'll talk more about that later, but I'm glad I got y'all's thoughts on that. I want to wrap up with something that I know is going to get Mike fired up, but with good reason. And I think, Andrew, this will excite you too, and I probably will be too. Mike, I think you mentioned this off the mic the other day. You watched the new Mario movie that just came out recently with your kids, right?
Correct.
What did you think of it?
Well, it was very good.
Really? Okay.
I've seen some reviews online that said it wasn't like meaningful enough or didn't do enough, didn't take any risks, but I thought it was really enjoyable from start to finish. The animation and how much they included on the screen was pretty crazy, especially if you're a fan of the games. There's not a moment that goes by without something that'll catch your attention, and the kids loved it, and that's sort of the barometer for success, I think, with those movies. I think my youngest said it was the best ever, so it was just a lot of fun. Just a lot of fun, so there's nothing wrong with that, that's for sure.
How old is he?
8.
The youngest? You said he's 8?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Hey, I remember being 8 years old. If an 8-year-old said it, I'll take his word for it, because I had the same feelings about a lot of movies at the age of 8. Andrew, are you like into those kind of movies, like Lego Movie, like Mario Movie? Are you into those kinds of animations?
No, not really. I actually saw Air last night. The Michael Jordan movie. Like the I guess technically it's a Nike movie, but I'm sure there was some input. I don't know that for a fact, but that was pretty good. So yeah, I would like to see Super Mario. What's it called? Is it Super Mario? What's it called? The movie?
The Super Mario Bros.
Just
movie,
the Super.
Yeah,
what it's called.
Okay, so like I would like to see that. Don't know if I'll pay money to see it. Might wait for that to come out on like a. I guess pay money directly to see it. Might wait for that to come out on like an HBO or a Amazon or something.
Yeah.
But I typically don't lean that way. Like I said, I saw Air last night. That was pretty good. There's one coming out in a couple of weeks, Big George Foreman or something.
Oh, really?
I want to see that.
Okay.
So, yeah, I typically kind of delve. I really like kind of like biographical movies and things like that. So,
have you guys seen the Lego Movie before? The one that came out like 9 years ago?
Yeah, I've seen the Lego Movie.
I haven't seen it, but is that movie kind of similar to the Mario movie that you watched?
No.
No? Okay. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen either one. I haven't seen
I mean, they're
because
both animation, but they're not very similar, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm kind of like Andrew. I don't lean toward those movies, but like I personally have nothing against them either. But maybe like once Ramadan is over next week and I have some free time, I'll have to go to the movies and I might check it out. Maybe I'll take you with me, Andrew. Maybe we'll both kind of like step out of our comfort zones and watch the Mario movie. But no, I'm gonna say I'm more like Andrew's forte. I like on the one hand, I like biographies. I like historical dramas. Like, have you guys ever seen like Judas and the Black Messiah? It came out 2 years ago. Daniel Kaluuya's in that movie. He's like the main protagonist. It's pretty good. I don't know how. What'd you say?
Did not.
You should watch it. It's about the Black Panthers. It's actually based on a true story. It's based on Fred Hampton, who like founded the organization. Very insightful. That's pretty good. But I also mentioned a few weeks ago, like I like the movie Cocaine Bear, which in terms of my sense of humor, I mean, as much as there's some gruesomeness in that movie, don't get me wrong, like the humor compensates for it. And so like, if you want to get me excited, I know that sounds bizarre, but I mean, those kind of movies like will get me pretty excited. I have a very interesting taste when it comes to movies. Like, I know some people are confused, maybe even perplexed, but that's just who I am. I have no shame in that. But have you guys not seen Cocaine Bear, by the way, up to this point? I know we talked about it a while ago. Have you guys seen it yet?
I saw it. I thought it was disappointing.
Whoa. Okay, we got to talk about this. I need to know why.
I thought the first 30 minutes were okay, but then it just sort of was boring.
Wait on. You thought after the first 30 minutes it was boring?
Yes.
That's like where the climax was coming together, man. I mean, I don't want to give anything away to people who haven't seen it, but like, it gets pretty climactic.
I disagree.
Man, you had me in the first half, Mike. You had me first half. Because, I mean, it is interesting to start. I think we both agree on that, but I don't know. I think even if you wanted a better ending, I think the climax was fine, but I digress. Stay with us as we're going to wrap up the week talking about how Joe Burrow is going to benefit or not benefit from this year's free agent class and what it means for the draft in terms of Burrow's success. And we're going to actually do our first official mock draft on this podcast Friday. Make sure you tune in for that. And we've got some more specials coming up on this podcast in the next couple of weeks, so make sure you tune in. Once again, for myself, Andrew, and Mike, I'm Muhammad Ahmad. We will see you on Thursday.